What if I told you Buick once built an engine so outrageous, so brutally powerful, that it was never truly allowed to see daylight? An engine designed not just to compete, but to dominate every rival on the street and even threaten the balance of NASCAR itself. This wasn't another run-of-the-mill big block. It was a forbidden powerhouse that General Motors quietly buried. Known as the Stage 2 455, it had the potential to rewrite muscle car history, but instead, it became a ghost in Buick's past, erased before it could rise. On paper, the Buick brand was never supposed to be about raw performance. For decades, Buick had been GM's luxury division, known for smooth, quiet sedans that catered to comfort rather than speed. Chevrolet, Pontiac, and Oldsmobile were the ones locked in a street battle for muscle car supremacy, while Buick played the role of the refined alternative. But in 1970, Buick shocked everyone when it unleashed the 455 cubic inch V8, the largest displacement big block of its era. Unlike high-revving small blocks, the 455 was all about torque, earth-shaking, tire-shredding torque. It delivered an astonishing 510 pound-feet of torque at just 2,800 RPM, a number that made the car feel like a missile despite weighing nearly 2 tons. This wasn't just fast, it was brutal. Still, for a small group of Buick engineers, even that wasn't enough. They saw untapped potential in the 455, and behind closed doors, they began developing a secret package that would transform it into something far more dangerous. This became the Stage 2 455, a race-bred evolution with bigger valves, wilder camshafts, revised cylinder heads, forged internals, and a redesigned intake system. The goal was simple: build an engine that could embarrass Chrysler's legendary 426 Hemi, threaten Chevrolet's big blocks, and push Buick into a league no one expected it to enter. The changes were extreme. Cast iron heads were swapped out for newly designed aluminum heads that allowed nearly 50% more airflow. The camshaft was a radical solid lifter profile, the pistons were high compression, and the intake manifold was designed for serious racing. With a Holley 850 CFM carburetor feeding it, the Stage 2 wasn't just powerful, it was a weapon. Officially, Buick rated it at a little over 500 horsepower, but insiders and dyno sheets whispered a darker truth. Properly tuned, these engines were pushing closer to 600 horsepower. That was Hemi territory, maybe even beyond. But here's the part that makes this story suspicious. Buick wasn't just preparing this engine for showroom bragging rights. The Stage 2 was intended for NASCAR, NHRA drag racing, and even street cars. A factory-backed racing program was in motion, and suddenly Buick, a vision no one took seriously in performance, was knocking on the door of America's most dominant racing legends. And then, just as quickly as it arrived, it disappeared. Why? Was GM afraid of letting its luxury brand overshadow Chevrolet? Or did rival automakers push back against the threat? One thing is certain: the Stage 2 had the potential to change the landscape of American performance forever. Instead, it was quietly shelved, erased from GM's future, and left as nothing more than a legend whispered about among enthusiasts. When Buick dropped its massive 455 into the GSX, it was already stretching the rules. But the Stage 2 package, that was outright rebellion. The problem was simple. The Stage 2 wasn't just fast, it was too fast. It wasn't just outpacing Chevrolet's famous LS6 454, it was creeping dangerously close to overshadowing the Corvette itself. And that was something General Motors could never allow. Buick, the so-called gentleman's car, was never supposed to dethrone Chevrolet, GM's golden child. On top of that, the timing couldn't have been worse. Insurance companies were cracking down on muscle cars, labeling high-powered engines as uninsurable. Meanwhile, federal emissions regulations were tightening year by year. GM used these pressures as the perfect excuse to bury the Stage 2 project once and for all. On paper, the most powerful Buick engine ever created was officially dead. Or was it?
Because despite GM's official stance, whispers from the early 1970s tell a different story. A handful of independent racers somehow got their hands on Stage 2 parts, and what they uncovered proved just how dangerous this engine really was. Stage 2 equipped Buicks were storming through the quarter mile in the mid-10-second range, without nitrous, without forced induction, just pure torque in horsepower. Heavily modified Mopars and Chevys were left eating dust. Even stranger, some racers insisted GM insiders were quietly feeding them Stage 2 components under the table. If Buick truly wanted the Stage 2 dead, how did these parts end up on drag strips across America? Was GM secretly defying its own rules, or was this Buick's quiet way of telling the world what could have been? One story from the street racing world says it all. A Buick GSX Stage 2 lined up against Ford's Boss 429 Mustang, a car built specifically to crush the competition with its semi-Hemi V8. The Mustang driver laughed. Buick was for old men, wasn't it? The flag dropped, the tires screamed, and the Buick launched like a missile. By the time the Boss 429 tried to catch up, it was already over. The GSX pulled ahead and never looked back. That race shattered illusions. If a Buick could humiliate Ford's most legendary street machine, then maybe the rumors were true. This engine was simply too powerful to exist. So, what happened to them? Why don't we see Stage 2 cars filling auction floors or dominating museums? The truth is just as mysterious as the engine itself. Buick never mass-produced the package. Some sources claim maybe 15 to 20 kits ever left the factory. Others argue that even fewer complete cars were built. Some were quietly sold without official records, while others may have been destroyed under corporate orders. And then there's the greatest rumor of them all. A factory-built GSX Stage 2 prototype locked away somewhere deep in a GM storage facility, untouched for decades. Part of the mystery comes from the numbers. In an era where automakers routinely lied about horsepower to appease regulators and insurance companies, Buick's official Stage Q rating of around 500 horsepower was intentionally vague. In reality, dyno sheets revealed something much more frightening. Stage 2 engines could push 600 horsepower in race trim, and with the right setup, some flirted with 700. That put Buick ahead of Ford's Boss 429, ahead of Chevrolet's LS6 454, and neck with Chrysler's 426 Hemi. And yet, Buick never admitted it, because acknowledging that the luxury division had just built GM's most dangerous engine would have caused chaos within the company. GM made sure the Stage 2 never saw full-scale production, but legends have a way of surviving. Enthusiasts and racers kept the dream alive throughout the 1970s, hunting down aluminum heads, radical cams, and high-flow intakes wherever they could find them. These parts became sacred treasures among drag racers. Underground builds surfaced, and they proved what Buick had tried to hide. The Stage 2 wasn't hype, it was real, and it was terrifying. Even today, the Stage 2 legacy refuses to die. Collectors and restorers have rebuilt these lost engines, showing the world what could have been if Buick had ignored GM's orders. And the results? Quarter-mile times in the tens, cars that could humiliate Boss Mustangs, Chevelles, and even Hemis without breaking a sweat. GM tried to bury the truth, but gearheads unearthed it anyway. So imagine if Buick had been unleashed. Imagine if the Stage 2 GSX had gone into full production. Muscle car history might have looked completely different. The Chevelle CS 454, the Boss 429, even Chrysler's Hemi, none of them would have been safe. NASCAR championships might have gone to Buick's way, and the Corvette itself might have lost its crown. But GM never allowed that future to exist. They silenced the rebellion before it could rise. And yet, here we are, decades later, still talking about it. Because legends never die. The Buick Stage 2 455 wasn't just an engine, it was a statement. Too powerful, too fast, too dangerous for its own time. GM buried it, but the truth is back in the open, and now the world knows what they tried to hide. So the question remains, was the Stage 2 Buick's greatest what if, or was it the muscle car that proved even giants were afraid? If you love discovering hidden automotive history and stories they tried to erase, make sure to subscribe to the Garage Legends and join us as we bring these forgotten machines back to life. Your support helps keep these legends alive.